Hey, everybody. It's your lovely Lotus Blossom Lizzie. And today I am going to talk to you about how to buy vintage books. So, the first thing I always like to ask is, how is everybody doing on this wonderful Tuesday evening? And you guys get me for 2 days in a row. So I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to share because I have been sourcing books like crazy lately. And so I wanted to kind of share with you and show you what I'm doing. But before I get started, I always like to suggest and ask that if you love videos like this, if you love this channel, then please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below and also hit the notification button because you're not going to know if the videos are coming up if you don't hit the notification button. So you can do that. Also, because YouTube has kind of changed things for us creators, just to let you know that even when you are in the chat and you are chatting with me, because this is all about being interactive, that it does count as a comment for me, and comments are king. So I would love it if you all interact with me. If you don't know how to chat while you're on mobile, the only thing you have to do is just scroll up on your mobile device, and then you'll be able to chat as well. So if not, you can leave a chat later. You can leave a comment later. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get started because, of course, I don't want to take too long, but you know, sometimes she's a little ranty, so I don't want to be ranty. And so let's go ahead and get this show on the road. So the first thing that I want to talk about, actually, I made me like a few notes to take, and because I didn't want to really leave anything out, because I know that a lot of people that follow this channel are also journalers, and they may be looking for things to go in their junk journal, or you may be making journals as well like I do. And so I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit. I'm going to kind of talk about what vintage and antique means and the reasons why you would want to kind of source your books, and kind of, you know, have some goals before you go and you do that, where you can get the books at on the cheap, and then, or should I say on the budget, because cheap is such a strong word. And then also I'm going to talk about what you can look for, what you should look for in a vintage book before you're getting it, and some things that you can do so that you can get a good deal on the books as well. And then I'm going to show you some of the books that I purchased, and then you'll see exactly how everything kind of comes together. So I always like to say, too, that I'm kind of looking all over the place and not directly at you, because I have like a really big screen, and I call my computer Spencer. So I'm looking at Spencer, and I have like all these screens up on Spencer just so I can monitor things. So if you're talking to me, then I can see it. And just know that there's a little bit of a delay. So for those of you on the replay, thanks for coming on. I love it if you leave a comment below and let me know what you think about today's broadcast. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was vintage as opposed to antique. And the reason why is because I'm starting to revamp my Etsy shop, and I am posting up vintage type of items there. And what I wanted to do was to make sure that I know what the definition of vintage is, because, you know, people, they make things up as they go just so it kind of can fit what they want. And so when I looked up vintage, I found out that the word itself originated from the wineries, and it's actually a term that they use for aged wine. So any wine that is aged is a vintage wine. So it doesn't have anything to do with anything else. Vintage pertains to wine, but that's not how people are using it. So I looked up in the Urban Dictionary, and of course they have a whole different definition, because people have been using vintage in different ways than just, you know, wine. And the Urban Dictionary's definition of vintage is anything that is not old enough to be an antique, but too old and it's kind of out of date. It's an item that's out of date, but it's not old enough to be an antique. And what's considered antique is anything over 100 years old. And you probably have some stuff around your grandma's house or your mother's house that is considered antique now. And I think just because we have like that millennial split, the year 2000, people don't kind of equate how old things really are. So you can really look at things that are like back in the 1990s, and those things are really old now because it's almost 2018. So anything that is, like from 1998 is actually 20 years old already. So you have to think about it that way. Hey, Rachel, thanks for coming on. How are you doing today? So, I'm going to be talking about how to buy vintage books and some things to look for. So, when you're going to look for like vintage books, the first thing that you need to think about is your reason for going to look for these books and what your use is going to be as well. Because if you're looking for collectible books, then of course the things that you look for in a book is going to be very different. If you are going to be looking for vintage books to kind of use like in your crafting, because you don't have to just use vintage pages in journals, you can use them in any crafting project. I've seen people make ornaments with them. You can make tags, paper clips, whatever. You can do all kinds of stuff with vintage pages from a book. So just keep that in mind. So, but for me, the reason why I'm going out looking for vintage books is because I'm going to be using them inside of journals. So you have to think about your reasons and what's relative to you when it comes to buying the vintage books. So let's talk about like the sources where you can purchase a vintage books. Of course, you can get vintage books online anytime. You can get them off of Amazon, you can get them off of eBay, and they're really a big deal because sometimes the dealers, they sell vintage items like they are collectible items, and they're not. So you have to be careful with that because you could pay like a pretty penny for some books that are not that old, but they're old enough to be vintage. Remember, we talked about vintage as opposed to antique. So, and then also a con is if you purchase a book online, you can't really flip through the pages of it and really kind of handle the book and see how it is, like if the binding is okay and whatever. So that's kind of a con when you're purchasing your books online. You can get the books from antique shops, but a con from buying books from an antique shop is they are very expensive because now you're going into the collectible realm and it is antique. I actually went to an antique shop a few days ago to see if I could source some old books, and they were very expensive for me. Some of the books were only like $4, but it was a little bit expensive for me. And so you have to think about that price. And I'm going to talk about pricing in a moment as well. You can go to estate sales and you can pick up vintage books as well, but there's the con is you can get like some really good deals at an estate sale if you hit the right estate sale. The con is sometimes you got to do a lot of driving and looking around and hitting just being lucky, getting there at the right time and all this stuff. Everything has to be really planned when you're doing estate sale kind of hopping around. And that's because you have to think about it. If you can kind of research things ahead of time, if you have the time to do it, you can research the estate sales that you're going to be going to and find out like a little bit about the people's lives before you actually go to that estate sale. Because say they've only been together for like 2 years, they haven't really had their household that long, and they're splitting up, people are getting divorced, and they're just selling everything. They might not have any vintage books there. You might get lucky, but probably 9 times out of 10 they don't have anything vintage. So you have to think about that, like what you're getting. So that's a con to going to estate sales. You can go to like garage sales. You never know what you're going to get at a garage sale. So again, it's like estate sales. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. You can get books from relatives that you know are kind of old, but sometimes it's hard for them to part with stuff like that, especially if they know you're going to be ripping the pages out. They might not go for that. So you have to think about that as well. Now, Goodwill is a good place to get books from. Sometimes it's hard to find like older books that you will be looking for. You're definitely not going to find antique books at the Goodwill, but you can find some vintage books, and the prices are really good when it comes to books. Goodwill is a little bit high on some things, but the books are pretty much a good deal when you go there. And so you can get them, sometimes you can get books for like 50 cents to 25 cents, especially children's books. And so Goodwill is a good place to go. And also another good place to source books is at church thrift stores. So they have church thrift stores everywhere, and they usually have really good items at church thrift stores. So just think about that. And of course, there's some other places that you can go to get the vintage books as well. So in a moment, I'm going to show you some of the books that I've picked up also. But I wanted to also talk about like what to look for in a book when you're going to look for these. Now, for my purposes and what's relative to me is that I'm going to be using these inside of journals. So I want the pages to be relatively looking good or, halfway decent. And I do want them to be before 1990. That's my criteria. So you have to make a criteria that kind of fits you and not society. Okay. So at first glance, you want the book to be like in relatively good condition. Like this book right here, it has a cover on it. It's in relatively good condition at first glance. Now, sometimes if you're looking for like vintage items, you might be looking for something that's old. And some books look old, and that's just because people don't take care of their books, and they just look bad. But if you look for a book and it looks old, it might be. So then you can look further into it. I would look at the copyright dates in the books, and usually they're, most of the time, they're in the first few pages. Now, a note with the copyright, what I've learned is sometimes there are more than one copyright date. So I actually had a vintage music papers, and like one of the dates was like in the 20s, and then it had a second date on there that was in the 60s, so it had been reprinted again. So you want to go with the second date, so that would have been from the 60s actually. So when it comes to the copywriting as well. So and also I noticed on atlases or map books, they don't usually have like a copyright. I've looked all over the place on some of the map books that I have, and I cannot find a copyright date. So sometimes you just can't find. You just can't find them. So, but that's no big deal because maybe you have some other criteria. So for the journal pages, another thing that you might want to look for is the illustrations in the books. Are you looking for just plain pages? Then you could get like a dictionary or encyclopedia. Or if you're looking for illustrations, you can get the older encyclopedias. They usually have lots of pictures and not a whole lot of writing because they didn't know what they were talking about back then. And also, you can look for like children's books, has lots of illustrations as well. So if you are going to be repurposing the book, then you want to make sure that the cover itself is in relatively good condition as well. So you don't want like the pages to be all falling off. And I'm going to give you like an example of that in a second when I show you my books. And of course, the condition of the pages, you don't want them to be all ripped up and stuff spilled on them. And a little bit of spill is okay. But if it's just like the pages are just ruined, then that might not be a book, or it had like mold or something like that on there. Then that might be something that you might not be interested in. So as far as the pricing on the vintage books, this is what I go by. When it comes to pricing on anything, not just books, that is what are you willing to pay for a book? What makes you feel good when it comes to paying a book? That's how I kind of gauge what's a good price on a book. So if I saw a book like this and I already have in my mind, this looks like a great book, immediately in my mind, a price kind of pops up as to what I'm willing to pay for that book. And it probably does for you, and maybe you just don't think about it and you overlook it. So that's something you want to think about. What are you willing to pay on the price? Now, keep in mind, depending depending on where you purchase your vintage book at, there is a possibility that you can negotiate the price of the books. And I've done that as well. So some places you can't. So if you buy your books online, like on eBay or Amazon, then chances are there's no negotiation in place. It is what it is. You buy the book or you don't. But if you go to Goodwill, again, they're not going to negotiate on the prices, but the prices aren't too bad anyway. But if you go to like a thrift store or a flea market, then I would never pay the price that they have on the book. I'm always going to try to Jew them down. And I don't mean nothing bad about that. I'm going to try to get the price down. And maybe I shouldn't have said that. That was insensitive of me. But I'm going to try to get the price down on the book and see if they will give me a better price on it. Even if it's like a little bit of a percentage off, then I'm good with it. Now, as far as like the negotiation on the prices, also you want to kind of give a little bit of thought if you want to do the whole haggling thing. Some people, it's uncomfortable for them to haggle. I've lived all over the world, and the U.S. is the only place where you can go to the store and you can't haggle. You can haggle every place else. So I kind of learned the art of haggling. So whenever I have the opportunity to do it, I go for it. So I usually haggle on the books. Now, I actually went to a thrift store today, and the thrift store that I went to, I've been there a few times, but there was a few things I didn't notice. Now, when I went in the door, they had a sticker on the door and it said that they had bread to give away. And I was thinking, this must be owned by a church. So I asked the person at the register if it was, and they said indeed it was owned by a church. So not only were they selling these items, they were also they had a food bank there. So then that kind of made me rethink whether I wanted to negotiate on the prices or not, because the prices were already kind of low. They were low already, so it was like, do I want to negotiate on the price and kind of, because they're selling these items so that they can help, people out. So you have to kind of think about that too. You have to think about your morals and values when it comes to negotiating the price. But I still negotiated a little bit because I bought a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm only going to look at the books. So I talked about vintage versus antique, and also what's relative to you and the reasons why you're going to be buying the vintage books in the first place, where you can source the books at, and what kind of things to look for. And I gave you some information on the prices. So now I'm going to show you a few of the books that I actually purchased. And I got a whole bunch of books, but I'm not going to go through all of them, and I'm not doing like a full flip through on the books or anything like that. But I wanted to kind of show you to kind of put everything together when it comes to buying the books themselves. So I am going to go to the cloud and then I'm going to show you some of the books. So these are just a few of the books, and if I have time, I'll pull some more of these out, and I'll tell you the reason why I selected these books. And let me just move this over just a little bit because my face is in the way. And so I'm going to tell you why I chose some of these books and some things I was looking for. So again, I'm looking for these for some journals that I'm making, and I'll give you like an example of the journal. So here's one of the journals that I'm making, and I have in the Etsy shop, and I also have some kits there as well, so that if you don't want to buy a book that's already together, you can actually purchase the kit and everything's already cut, and all you have to do is put it together and add your own things. You can add your own book pages in. So this is a book page right here, and I sew things into the book. So let me move this over just a little bit. Here we go. Usually I sew things into the book, so I just have paper clips holding them on. And you can see, let's find another page in here where so this is from a book as well. So you can see I picked these pages out of a botanical book that I have. and they have lots of colors. So it depends on what you want to use the book for. Again, if you're interested in the kits, they are up in the Etsy shop. You can just go to pleasantcreations.com, and the link will be below as well, and you can check out the kits that are available and the books that are already done and up, and there'll be more books coming up as well. So let's see, just trying to make sure I monitor everything. Oh, what did I do with you? Okay, so sorry about that. All right, so here's some of the books. So let's just go through just a few really quick. So this is a shipman's book, and I found this at a church thrift store. And as you can see, at first glance, it looks kind of rough. It looks like there's no help in this book, but once I opened the book up, the pages were in good condition. Now this book is from 1958. I made me a little note, 1958, and of course you can always find the copyright right in the inside cover, so it's right there for 1958. And there was a few reasons why I picked this book, and one of them is that the book was really large. I wanted a large book, and just move some things around on my screen here. I wanted a large book, which I have, and I don't know what's going on with this chat here. My chat is just a little cray-cray here. Oops. All right, there we go. All right. For some reason, the chat is not showing right on here. Okay. So I purchased this book because it was a large book, for one thing. And then the next piece, I liked the writing in it, and it had lots of illustrations. And even though it's black and white, I felt like maybe I could cut these out and make these like separate pieces of ephemera as well. So I really love the shipbuilding book, and I've actually used it in some journals already. And you can see the pages are in good condition. Now I haven't found a way to get the pages out so that they're still together. So for instance, if you look at this music page, you can fold it out and the pages are still together. So I've had to kind of take the pages out like one at a time, but that's okay. So that's the shipbuilding book. And again, I can't remember how much I paid for this. It says $1.99, $2. So the thrift store that I bought this from, I don't think I tried to negotiate on this because it was a church thrift store, so I didn't want to negotiate on that one. So this next book is, I got this one today, and it's a cookbook. And again, the cover is in good condition. I knew that I was going to be using this maybe in like a cooking type theme of Traveler's Notebook. It's from 1968, and I really love the illustrations that they have in here. It's like everything is like fully illustrated. So if you look, I should have put like a little thing in here. They had like a rabbit in here. Look at the chicken on this one. So the pictures are really nice and vibrant, and I love the colors, and they will surely have matched with some papers that I have. And then the pages themselves, I could put the whole recipe in if I wanted to. And I love the illustrations that they have on this side, joining the chicken. And the size was good too. So I'm looking for a book that has a good size that's going to look good in the Traveler. So let's just look at the size in this. So you can see that's still going to be a good size to go into the Traveler's Notebook. So that's something that I'm looking at as well. So let's look at the next book that we have here. And this is Robert the Rose Horse, and I have never heard of this book before. And this is a Dr. Seuss book, so I was kind of reading it a little bit. When I purchased it, I was reading a book because I was thinking it was made in the Dr. Seuss style, where it has like all the, the rhythmic rhymes and everything. But actually, the words don't rhyme. It's just a story. And maybe that's why we've never heard of it before. So this was actually from 1962. And you can see this book is in horrible condition. Well, not totally horrible because the cover looks terrible, but the pages themselves are wonderful, actually. There's a few stains on them, and I think I'll be able to get them out. So, yeah, I can take the stitching out of here. As a matter of fact, it's so old that the stitching I can almost pull it out with my hands. So I really like this book. I like the colors in it, and I felt like I could use it for my purposes. So that is Robert the Rose Horse from 1962. All right, so we have this book right here. And this one is the Book of Knowledge. I got this from the Goodwill also. And I was just, at first I thought it was an encyclopedia, which it kind of sort of is. But look, when you first open up the cover, look at those colors. Look at those colors. That's a book only a creative person would love. And inside, look at the illustrations that are inside the book. And I love the typeset that was in here. I love the illustrations. Some things I don't really agree with. Because, you know, back when this was made, it was in an agrarian society. And I think this one is 1954. What did I do with the sticker on this one? This one is, 1954. It says January printing 1955. So I talked about the copywriting. And so this one probably originally was the first original copyright was in 1937, and so 1955 was the printing of this book. So that's what you would go by, the 1955. And so some things are in color in here. The pages, everything is in pristine shape, and it has like children's stories in here and rhymes and poetry. And I actually been reading it, and I didn't want to take the pages out. Because I love them so much. You know, it almost seems sacrilegious to take a page out of a book, doesn't it? But oh my goodness, it's absolutely wonderful. So, I still haven't took a page out of here. I love this book. But everything was in good condition. You could tell that it was kind of old, even by the binding, because they don't make encyclopedias like that. I remember when I was a kid, everybody had a set of encyclopedias. They didn't say anything inside of them. I remember trying to do my homework using them encyclopedias. You couldn't even do your homework. You had to go to the library because they had like this much information in the encyclopedia, unfortunately. So I'm going to show maybe one more book. Let me look down here. Which was what we want to show. Let's show this one. This one is a big one. This one is from 1969. I put my little tag on here. And when you first open up the book, of course, when you first open the book, you could tell it's a little worn and a little old just by the cover here. And when you open it up, it has this wonderful picture in the front here. And then it has these stunning images in it. And definitely I can do a botanical book. And actually, the pages that I showed you in that Travelers that I have almost completed came from this book here. And it is just wonderful. It's a large book, so any pages that I take out of here are going to be able to fit in any size journal that I have. So that was another reason why I got this book. And of course, I got it for a really good price. I got it at the Goodwill, and I think I paid maybe like $1 for it. So it's like just fantastic. So I'm not going to show any more books because we'll be here all day. Because one thing, I just want to stop and like read. Look at that volume and mass and weight. That's amazing. I just love this book. So if y'all have any questions for me, you can ask me. I am going to be on the chat for a bit as well. And so I hope this will help you when it comes to purchasing your vintage books. Like I said, just be aware of what's vintage and what is considered antique and what it means to you. What are you going to be using it for? What is it relative to you? Watch where you source your books at, because sometimes you can get them a lot cheaper. Check out the church thrift stores. Is a great place. And just know what you're looking for before you go in there, because it can be overwhelming because they just have tons and tons and tons of books in there, and because they have lots of new books that are coming in as well. And then just think about when you pick up a book, just think about like, what are you willing to pay for it? Like, I probably would have paid more for this book. I think I paid like, it was like 10 cents or something like that. I mean, you can't buy that for $1. I couldn't negotiate on that one. So that is everything on the book. I would love to know, if you buy books, do you have vintage books in your home as well? So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification button so that you'll be notified when more videos like this will come out, and leave a comment if you are on the replay. I would love to know what you think about all these wonderful, beautiful, beautiful books. So with that, I'm going to say love, peace, and hair grease from your sweet Lotus Blossom and lovable Lizzie. Have a fantabulous day and enjoy life.